Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Poetry Thursday. Little informal BookTube ritual where some channels take Thursday to read poetry, read you a poem or two, maybe talk about poetry. And as is the wont on this channel, I have turned this innocent ritual into a psychodrama by reading one book, 20th century American poetry, which is it's not thematic, it's chronological, and it's taking us in a march through poetry in America in the 20th century. And the reason why this is fodder for melodrama is because it's in the 20th century American market that poetry died as a popular genre. At the turn of the 20th century, a normal person, a person who was reading Mark Twain or the Romantic Poets or the Bronte Sisters or the latest Edna Ferber novel, could go into their local dry goods store, their local bookstore, and sample the new releases. And the books weren't brutally overpriced the way they are now. So they could sample the new releases and decide, well, what do I want to read? There's a new science romance from Edgar Rice Burroughs. I'll definitely get that. And there's a new novel, maybe from, or a collection of short stories. I'll definitely get that. And there's a new volume of poetry from this poet or that poet. And I've liked their work very much. I'll get that as well. So I'll make a bundle. I'll get some other stuff too, but I'll get those three books. That was at the turn of the 20th century. Poetry was just a genre. It had to be enjoyable. It had to be comprehensible. It had to entertain you. It had to provoke you. It had to be worth its money to the general reading public. And at the turn of the 21st century, that was completely over. That is completely over. That is absolutely not the case at all. And this anthology, by the nature of its remit, is going to chronicle that change. So it's provoked a lot of responses in me, and I wondered what I should do once we got to the hour of the wolf, once we got to the hour of darkness, and we are there now. There'll be a few tiny exceptions, but we are now at the point where the zeitgeist is changing to make poetry into the ultimate black turtleneck sweater gated community of incomprehensibility, of hatred for its own readers. We are now in the era that saw poetry change in that way, the exact same era that saw art change in that way. Those two things are analogous. I would argue that there's also an analogy to be made with atonal classical music. Classical music that is actively designed to be horrible to hear. Same thing with using duct tape to duct tape a banana to a wall and calling it a work of art. Or putting a urinal on a slightly raised dais and saying that's a work of art. And you're wrong if you don't see it. It's not that we're going to laugh the so-called artist out of town. You're the one we're going to laugh out of town. And the same thing happened to poetry. That if you don't get this, well, then you just don't get poetry. And maybe we don't want you around in the Cantab Lounge. That is now, we are now in the period in this book, we've been doing this for a while, we're now in the period in this book where that will be true and where the exceptions will be just that. Very rare, very odd. So I debated whether or not to continue, but a lot of you, in fact everybody watching this series wanted me to, so I guess we'll go on a little bit further here. And today we are reading a so-called poet called Kenneth Fearing. Who was a horrible person, a lech, a drunk, talentless in poetry. He's in this anthology because the anthology's editors think that he's some sort of foundational figure. But he had no talent as a poet. And that has been rare. In our sojourn through this book, that it has been rare. It has not been rare for me to read you a poet and say, I don't like this. But it has been rare so far for me to say that this person is absolutely talentless. They don't have any talent at poetry. That's going to become almost universal from this point out for the rest of the year. We are definitely going to finish with this book this year. I cannot face this book a third year. And after this, we will have the ultimate corrective. But Kenneth Fearing wrote a book. He wrote a book early in his career. He wrote a novel. He wrote thrillers and also porn. He was a lech. He was a creep. He was a lowbrow, he was petty, he was vindictive, he was a violent drunk. He was everything that you don't want. We don't need to hold our artist to high esteem, but he was a horrible person. And the only way in reading that we tend to validate horrible people is if they somehow transform that into great art. which certainly can be done. Kenneth Fearing never did that. But he wrote a book comparatively early in his career. He wrote a novel called The Big Clock that had a pretty clever premise and got a movie version that made him a ton of money that he spent. He drank it. And it then got another movie version starring Kevin Costner, of all people, an effective movie. It is an effective gimmick. The Big Clock has an effective gimmick at its heart. And maybe if Kenneth Fearing had been a gimmick writer, a gimmick thriller writer, and just devoted himself to that and done nothing else, maybe I wouldn't care all that much. Certainly, when it comes to gimmick novel writers of the 1940s and 1950s, he wouldn't have been the only person who was a two-timing drunken lech. I read the books anyway, so I might not have cared, but he's in this anthology for poetry. And I thought I would read you one of those poems. And this is not the first time, but this will be very common going forward from here, is that I will be apologizing ahead of time. This is called, the editors include two poems here. I'm going to include one from 1935 called Dirge. 1, 2, 3 was the number he played, but today the number came 3, 2, 1. That's the first line. Bought his carbide at 30 and it went to 29. Had the favorite at Bowie, but the track was slow. Oh, executive type, would you like to drive a floating power, knee action, silk-upholstered 6? Wed a Hollywood star? Shoot the course in 58? Draw to the ace, king, jack? Oh, fellow with a will who won't take no, watch out for 3 cigarettes on the same single match. Oh, Democratic voter born in August under Mars, beware of liquidated rails. Denouement to denouement, he took a personal pride in the certain way he lived his own private life. But nevertheless, they shut off his gas, nevertheless the bank foreclosed, nevertheless the landlord called, nevertheless the radio broke. At 12 o'clock, just arrived, just once too often. Just the same, he wore one gray tweed suit, bought one straw hat, drank one straight scotch, walked one short step, took one long deep, drew one deep breath, just one too many. And wow, he died as wow he lived, going whop to the office and bluey home to sleep, and biff, got married, and bam, had children, and oof, got fired. Zowie did he live, and zowie did he die. With who the hell are you at the corner of his casket, and where the hell are we going on the right-hand silver knob, and who the hell cares walking second from the end with an American Beauty, wreath from that, why the hell not? Very much missed by the circulation staff at the New York Evening Post, deeply, deeply mourned by the BMT. Wham, Mr. Roosevelt, pow, Sears Roebuck, awk, deep, Big Dipper, bop, sunny rain, summer rain, sorry, not that it makes a difference at this point, but summer rain, bong, Mr. Bong, Mr. Bong, the end. That is Dirge. It is obviously meant to be, let's be charitable here, let's steelman it for a minute, it is obviously meant to be a reflection on the hollowness of what was then in the 1930s, the burgeoning, empty suburban life. You get married, you have kids, you get a job, you get fired, you have your suit, you go into the grave, you get a pallbearer, you're missed by a circulation department of a newspaper, but that's it. It's obviously meant to be a comment on that. In the shadow that Mr. Roosevelt mentioned, in the shadow of the Great Depression. It's just not good. Most of the lines don't make any sense. Most of them are completely dependent on footnotes, and this thing has a ton of footnotes. Left without those footnotes, I'm not saying that footnotes are a bane. Obviously, Alexander Pope needs footnotes. But does the poem depend on the footnotes? Does it depend on you knowing the information that's in the footnote? Well, 20th century American poetry comes to rely completely on you knowing that information. If you don't know that information, you don't have the secret decoder ring to get into the poem in the first place. That's not completely true with Dirge. Not completely. It's obvious to tell from the form and shape of the thing what it is meant to be. It is meant to be a wry commentary on how men are hollowing themselves out to live the 9-to-5 life and go home to the suburbs. A very well-worn poetic subject, but it can be done well. It isn't done well here. It's lazy and impulsive and unedited, and it's junk. It's the kind of junk that this guy wrote when he wasn't writing junk novels. But at least his junk novels are enjoyable. Anyway, that is Ken Fearing. That is our Poetry Thursday for today. We will have to hope for better next week, but we probably won't get it. I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.